Another thing with this other NPC, I forget, he's like a boy, and he's like talking to his sister. But what he says to her,
I totally missed that.
What he says to her is, "You look just like Yuna," and she looks nothing like Yuna. And Waka is saying that Chapu looks just like Tidus, and he looks nothing like Tidus. So these people's like definition of what it means to look just like someone is extremely loose.
Yes. And I'm trying to think of
you have arms and legs? You look just like my brother.
and hair and eyes. Yeah, so...
What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Ark podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
Last time we left off right as we entered Guadosalam.
Yes.
There's a lot to cover in this place. There's so much sort of lore packed into here. We got the Farplane.
Yes. Or like a projection of the Farplane. Yeah.
And Pyreflies and Seymour's past and the Guado and the humans.
The Guado in general. Like, what's their deal, right?
Whole lot going on here. So
yeah,
we're probably going to end up splitting this into 2 episodes. I had originally thought we'd get up through the Makalania Temple and finish the boss there. I'm starting to think that's probably not going to happen. We are going to do a little shorter episodes this time for 2 reasons. 1, there's kind of a lot of things going on behind the scene, but 2, I'm actually recovering from a pretty intensive medical procedure that happened this week. I am not comfortable at all. Yeah. So we'll see how long I can go here. But anyway, so sorry about that. The next 2 weeks will be maybe a little shorter, but we'll get back to speed after that. So, since we're on the timer, let's just hit it up.
Okay.
You enter Guadosalam, and you're met there by Trummel Guado, I think his name is. He's like the advisor or butler of Seymour.
The butler.
He tries to like grab Yuna and be like, "Come, he's waiting for you."
Yes.
And they're like, "What are you doing? Like, stop! Who are you?" Right? I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry." He explains himself. Seymour's waiting for you at his manor. Come and speak to him, kind of. Thing.
Do the Guado remind you of the Shumi a little bit from Final Fantasy VIII?
I didn't make that connection.
You didn't? They got those big hands.
Oh, the big hands.
Right? They got
That's
big
true.
hands.
That's true.
And they've got those robes, and there's it's mostly the hands.
The hands are definitely. I didn't make that connection.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny. It's interesting to look at the Guado too. They have long arms, meaning they can reach far. Right? They have big hands, meaning they can hold and manipulate things and objects. Just like a big head would imply intelligence or pride.
Sure,
big hands means they have hands places. They're doing things.
Hands in things.
In things, yeah. They have their hands in situations. Long legs mean quick and efficient travel, whatever. Long arms and big hands imply reach and ability to manipulate, right?
Yeah.
And it also means strength. If I were to say that Henry Ford had a big hand in the invention of the assembly line, telling him the size of Henry Ford's hands are big.
Yes,
Henry Ford, right? That was Henry Ford.
Henry Ford.
Anyways, so the Guado live amongst the trees and nature. Their hair's green. They have like elf ears. There's only a few people who you actually see their ears, but they're pointy. They're pointy elf ears. So they're like a nature type, like almost like Ents, right? They're like little tree beard people.
They're like a combination of an Ent and an elf.
Yes. But so their hair's green, signifying a oneness with nature, though in seeming defiance of that nature, they are the most clothed people in the entire game. All the way, like wrist to neck to ankles, feet. I don't even see their feet. Like all the way, they're completely covering up their bodies.
I was actually talking about this on the streams that I do with the patrons. Like, looking at Seymour's design over the years, I've always been distracted by his hair and his face and things like that.
Yeah.
And I had never actually looked at his hands that closely.
Oh, yes.
Partially because they're
looking at that.
Partially covered by his sleeves anyways.
Yes,
But that was when I looked at it and went, oh, now he looks a lot less human to me, now that I've seen his hands.
But it's almost like the sleeves are covering, it's like he's kind of trying to cover up his Guado-ness.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't really love the Guado part of him.
Yeah.
Something gives me that vibe a little bit. Also, then I have, the Guado are the most clothed people in the game. Now, some people in the comments have mentioned here and there about whether or not we will comment on how clothed certain people are in a positive or negative light, right? But it's important to understanding characters as well. Like as you mentioned before, with the way that Donna's dressed might actually imply something to her character as opposed to just
Yeah.
The surface level thing. So I still feel like it's important to call out. Seymour, it's funny because he's half Guado, and he is the least clothed of all the
he's
Guado.
got like open bare chest.
Yes,
Yeah.
he shows more of his nature, you can say. And that almost seems like a rejection of the Guado culture, because clothing is culture, right? You put the robes on you, that's the culture of wherever you're from that you're endowing yourself with, right? So the Guado never show anything but their hands and head. That's it. So they're at one with nature, but they're also entirely clothed in culture, revealing very little of their own nature. So Seymour, being only half Guado, he is like Yuna, and he's mixed race. And with that, in the artist rendition comes conflict, right? He's got one foot in each world, and that kind of shows in his appearance as well.
Yeah.
The idea of having big hands, this is an interesting thing. This is a big thing in Korea. It's not as big a thing in Japan, but it's still a thing, right? To comment on the size of someone's hands is also to say that they are generous, right?
Oh.
Say, you have very big hands, right? Yeah. This person has big hands. That would be a way of implying that they're very generous as well. So anyways, there's a lot going on here, but those are my initial thoughts on seeing the Guado here, and the notes I took down.
Nice. Yeah, so before going into the manor, I kind of stopped by in the little inn sort of section.
Oh, yeah.
And talked to Maechen over there.
Yeah.
You get some really interesting details about the Farplane and Fireflies from his perspective, or from what he knows, right? So to kind of like briefly summarize, the Farplane is essentially like the afterlife of the world of Spira.
Yes, like their spirit world.
Yeah, and we'll actually get to go there or see a projection of it.
A projection, that's important, yeah.
But what he says about fireflies in particular is really interesting to note. So I want to read what he says here. He says, they may be called fireflies, and these are, of course, the little lights we've been talking about.
Yeah,
that sort
little
of float
fairies.
around, right?
Yeah.
They may be called fireflies, but they aren't really flies, you see. They're those lights you see whenever a fiend dies. The little fellows are responsible for a few fantastic phenomena. Visions of the past, spheres, and we're going to learn more about spheres today, too.
Yeah, this episode.
Fiends, these are all the fireflies doing. In fact, fireflies have something to do with aeons, too. The dreams of the faith reach through the spirit of the summoner, and that which is unreal becomes real for all to see.
It becomes realized. So the fireflies are realizing agents of the abstract, like ideal, unseen, invisible world becomes realized through the fireflies. They they're the earthly substance that meets the abstract and then concretizes it, realizes it.
Now this is something that, if this is your first time playing the game, really important to understand about the nature of aeons.
Yeah.
In order to understand this game by the time you're done playing it.
Okay.
Because maybe you've played other Final Fantasy games or other RPGs where you summon things and it's like maybe this is coming from some other plane.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Exactly.
Aeons in the world of Final Fantasy X are more like an abstract concept, something that is unreal, that is made real through the faith and summoners and fireflies. The three of them have a relationship.
This is the idea of a symbol, right? So you have the two sides of a thing, but then the symbol's like the thing in the middle that connects them.
Yes.
Right? That's the fireflies.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll read this part again. The dreams of the faith. Actually, let me start one sentence back. In fact, fireflies may have something to do with aeons, too. The dreams of the faith reach through the spirit of the summoner, and that which is unreal becomes real for all to see.
I love it.
So that is how the description of the process of summoning an aeon is described by Maechen. And that's going to be important to understand, right? It's not maybe like a summoning in the sense that you're used to in other fantasy worlds or something like that. So I just want to point that out. Just understand that's how summoning works in this game. Okay?
Cool.
All right. As for the Farplane, let me see if there's anything there I want to mention right now.
I didn't go there until after we met with Seymour.
Yeah, I'm just going to just describe what it is.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So let me just read what the wiki says about it. The Farplane is a location in the world of Spira in Final Fantasy X. An underworld, it is the gathering place for the dead. Spirits enter the Farplane either after they've been sent by one of the summoners or a sender, or after they have accepted their death. Those not sent to the Farplane may remain on the mortal plane as an unsent or fiends. Both types able to send themselves by fulfilling a purpose failed to do in life. So
it's very Japanese, by the way, with their idea of what a spirit is, right?
Yeah.
What a mamono is something that, the spirits, they linger here and they can be sent or they can accept their fate and go on. Otherwise, they stay on Earth. That's a very Shinto kind of thing. By the way, I said the word mamono. That's the word they use for fiend.
Oh.
In Japanese.
Okay.
Do you remember mamono? Do you remember me saying that word?
Yes.
In Nier Automata, those are shades.
Yes.
Now, and remember what I said about the word, where it was like, it's just a normal word in Japanese. It's not like this. The word shade is a really creative idea of like mentioning, oh, this is a monster. But the word in Japanese is just mamono, which means evil spirit, right? It's just, and it's that same word, mamono. It's elsewhere. It's in other games we play too. But basically, it's always translated in this really creative way in these English games that we play.
Yeah. And
they never say what the word actually would be in Japan. And I was critical, I think in Nier, I was a little bit critical about the fact that they use, what was it, like the word for like grimoire vice, right?
Oh, right.
In Japanese, it just means white book.
Yes.
Right, but then we come up with grimoire in English. It's like, oh, we take out this word and then a different language or whatever. But in Japanese, it's white book. And then the enemies are just, well, in Final Fantasy X, we call them fiends, right? But I'm realizing something that maybe I was a little too critical back in our Nier podcast, because the word mamono in Japan, while it does mean evil spirit or demon just in general, it doesn't conjure the same imagery in the Western mind as it does in Japan.
Sure.
What a demon or an evil spirit is in Japan isn't like this see-through ghost kind of thing that we think of here, or this like devil with horns or whatever.
Or that Titus thinks of when he's like, wait a minute, and he's like, for a second before they go into the Farplane, remember, it gets towards dark, and he just sees those like ghost things, and he's like, what are you imagining, Waka?
Exactly,
system? Yeah.
exactly. It's not, so the way a Japanese person would think when they hear mamono is like the Japanese, the yokai, the
spirit of a thing.
Yeah,
right?
But it's a demon spirit, but it's an actual manifestation of a physical body. Generally speaking, they don't have feet, by the way. Oh. An evil spirit in Japanese, the way you can tell it's an evil spirit isn't through the ghostly stuff like here in the West. You look at their feet and see if they're standing on the ground. Do you remember the movie The Eye?
Yes.
By the way, remember yes, that's part of it, where she's freaked out. Not just because she's there, but she looks down and sees, I can't remember if she was in the air or if she didn't have feet, but either way, that's the idea there. Okay. That's a lot of words to say that word actually, it makes sense that they don't just translate it so straight into English, and why they just leave it as just the normal word in Japanese. Yeah. Because that's the right word in Japanese. They think of this kind of fiends or shades or whatever. They think of something a little bit more along the lines of the enemies in video games when we talk about, the mamono in Japan. Whereas in Western countries, we think of a demon and we're just like, I don't know, it just doesn't work the same. It just feels different. It feels a little too different.
It's a different
so you got to creatively
context.
kind of make a new word, that can describe what they are. That's not what the Japanese word is. But.
Yeah. So just a couple things I wanted to point out there about the Farplane that are important to remember.
Okay.
So when people die in this world, they need to be sent to the Farplane by a summoner or a sender, right? That's one way that the souls get there. Mm-hmm. The other way is if the person accepted their death in life. Yeah. So they had already accepted death before they died. This will be important in just a minute.
Pretty soon.
But also, those who are not sent or who have this really important purpose they feel is left unfulfilled, or an attachment to the world, can stay in the world, okay, as fiends. So that's kind of the way the mythology of this world and the Farplane works. So they have access to the Farplane through a projection here in Guadosalam. There's like a way that you can visit the Farplane and speak to the souls of the dead. Now, what Maechen brings up in this conversation with him is that there is some contention. The Al-Bhed have a different view on what you're really seeing when you go there.
Yes, exactly.
The Al-Bhed don't believe that it's actually the souls of the dead in the Farplane.
Yes.
They believe that fireflies go there, but that they react to the memories of the people. So when you're there and you're thinking about a loved one you've lost, that the fireflies will just sort of project the image of that person from your memory to you.
Yes.
But it's not really the person's soul.
So in that sense, you would be going up and talking to somebody, and you're basically talking to yourself.
Yes.
You're having a conversation with
your
yourself.
Thought of what that person
But you can
is.
see the projection talking back to you.
Yes.
And that may be helpful.
In fact, I even wonder if they do talk because they never show that. It's always like, it's always Waka talking to Chapu, but Chapu just kind of stands there.
Yeah, he doesn't talk back.
And like same with Yuna's parents and like anyways, I'm not saying that is the case. It could be very well be the case. They just didn't animate that
says.
In the game or whatever.
Right.
But that's the what's the word I'm looking for? That's the impression I got.
No.
Was like it's just this image of the person, and then they just sit there talking to a projection, basically.
Yeah.
Whether they talk back, I'm actually not entirely sure. But I know that Yuna does say, I'm going to go talk to my father in the Farplane to like get some advice. So like maybe they do, but at least it doesn't show that happening at any point during the playthrough we've done so far.
Gotcha.
Anyways.
Basically what you're doing is you're walking into the Farplane. We're skipping over a huge
We'll go back to it.
What you're doing, you're walking in there and you are summoning a person.
It's
right?
like from your memory
summon.
or your dream, right?
Yes.
It's like you're summoning
and
the
you
fireflies.
use your mental powers and the fireflies will make real your summon.
That's exactly right. Yeah. The last thing that Maechen says there, right, is the thing about the Al-Bhed theory that is suspect is that they never, when people go to the Farplane, it's only dead people that ever get projected. If you're having a memory of a person who's alive,
that's the weird
don't
part.
Appear.
See, and that's the part that maybe the Al-Bhed theory doesn't.
That might not be correct at all.
There's something real here. It may not be completely real, but there is something real because. If it's only internal, some idea that just gets projected back to you from your own internal heart or mind, then there shouldn't be any issue with showing you somebody who already exists, who's still alive, right? So there's some type of conflict there. Yeah.
So this is something that this team is, they do on purpose. They leave certain points of lore vague on purpose in order to get fans talking and debating about, what about this, and creating like theory crafting. They really like fans to do that. And that's really kind of carried on in the games they've done after this in particular. So it'll be nice to see what people's theories and thoughts are on this particular issue, whether the Farplane does have actual souls or whether they're just projecting memories. In the comments, we will read those, probably 2 podcasts after this, and kind of see what people think on that. But they purposefully create like a conflict between the 2 points of view on this. Yeah. And they don't answer the question.
No.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyways, they kind of do that a lot in this game. But okay. Now that we understand what it is, before you even go there, you go to see Seymour first in his manor. And when you enter into the room, they make a point when you talk to Lulu to once again bring up the fact that Seymour is half human, half Guado. Yeah. His father, Jyscal, was the last leader of the Guado. And he married a human woman because his entire sort of goal was to bridge this gap between the 2 races and to bring them back together. And in addition to marrying a human woman and having a half-human son, he also brought the religion of Yevon to the Guado.
Yeah, this is interesting. The Guado used to not be involved in Yevon. Yeah. Until extremely recently.
Yep, Jyscal was the one who did it. And this is why Waka in particular really reveres Jyscal. Because they're talking about how great he is when Trommel kind of comes back in and they're talking about how he died recently, and it's very tragic. Right. And Yuna's sharing like her feelings about him, and so Titus is like, was he really that great of a guy? Like, who was this guy, right? And he's like, oh, Waka says he brought Yevon to the Guado, and he was a great man because of this. So that was Jyscal's whole deal. He was trying to like repair relations, or maybe not repair, but strengthen relations between human and Guado. And his way of doing that was, one, to marry a human woman, have a half-human son, and to also bring their religion to his people.
Which is totally a thing, by the way.
Yeah, totally.
Like, this is, I can't remember who it was. Many of the ancient medieval leaders and the Romans and Constantinople and all around, it would be, they would marry somebody, or their wife would convert to Christianity or something like that. Yep. And then, before long, they've converted, and then they bring in everybody afterwards, right? But it's like a half-half kind of thing at first that then eventually becomes, the whole thing. It's kind of interesting.
Also, a couple other things I took down as notes. Titus kind of laughs as Lulu is offering explanation about Guadosalam and how there aren't any temples here, and that summoners usually just pass through and they don't spend a lot of time here because there's no temples. Because he's like, you're explaining things to me and I didn't even ask a question. Like,
yes, that's fascinating.
She's just offering up, and she did this too when we met Keenock. She started explaining who Keenock was to him before he asked any questions about it. So she's starting, and I really liked Titus's response to this, because she's like, oh, would you rather I not do that? He's like, no, that's not it. Maybe you finally believe that I don't know anything about Spira. So this is...
She's not as suspicious of him.
Yes, and remember back in Kilika, we had been talking about how maybe there's two ways to look at this. She being suspicious of him as, I don't believe you, that you don't know this stuff, and you have some ulterior motive for pursuing Yuna or whatever, and I don't trust you, being one thing. The other being you're not competent, and
you're just
kind of dumb, and I don't like you.
Not very
It
smart.
seems that this seems to make it clear, at least, that she was very suspicious about him. She didn't believe that he was telling the truth, that he had some other reason for being there. So he's saying, maybe you finally believe me that I don't know anything about Spira, and maybe that means you believe me about Zanarkand too. And she says, well, there are many things I do not know. Your Zanarkand is one of those things. I suppose I can't say what I think either way. Still, be careful. You shouldn't let other people, you shouldn't tell other people.
Right.
He's like, okay, also, you talk to Aaron here, and he's sharing his suspicions of Seymour. And Kimari does too. And it's kind of playing creepy music while you're here. So there's kind of a lingering foreshadowing of Seymour.
And you're in this like banquet hall with all this food. And all the drapes and everything.
Yeah, so he's like, stay on guard. And Titus is like, why? This guy's just a priest, right? And Aaron says, those with power use that power. Maesters have power. And I love Titus's response to this. He's like the person who challenges everyone's thinking, right? Now, so far, that's always been in regards to what Yevon's teachings are.
Yes.
Aaron is clearly not in line with Yevon's teachings anymore.
Right.
He has problems with Keenock and the Maesters, and he's warning him to beware. And he was in Zanarkand for 10 years, right? So Titus, even though he has already said in his inner monologue he does not like Seymour, challenges the reason why Aaron is suspicious of him. He's like, Maesters have power, and he's going to use that power. And Titus says, what? Or wait, are you sure you don't have something against Yevon?
Right. He's just checking everybody, just making sure.
It's really telling about the kind of character he is that he would do that when he already doesn't really believe in this stuff.
It's like he doesn't have a specific grudge against Yevon. He's just questioning everything everyone's doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's just interested in the truth.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
And even though he's been questioning Yevon the whole time, he's now questioning whether Aaron questions Yevon and whether that's justified.
I like that. I didn't think of it that way. I like that though. That's cool.
I liked that little touch of his character. He doesn't have like necessarily a bias.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has a bias, but like he's as the least biased person in this game,
yes.
I would say.
Yes. It's just that everyone around him praises Yevon all the time. So
Yeah.
he naturally kind of takes the oppositional position to that.
Right.
But when somebody else moves in the other direction, he's kind of pulling them back.
Yeah,
That's so
exactly.
funny. That's so funny.
So he's even doing that to Arin here. And Arin chuckles at him. I lived in a long time in Xanarkand was his response to that. So it's like, that's the reason why I
10
question.
years in the modern godless society.
Yeah,
And
that's
now
why I
he's-
don't necessarily
Yeah.
have a thing
There you go.
for Yevon anymore, right?
There you go.
So that's a nice little conversation.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, now, Trommel comes in. We kind of went over that. This is where Seymour decides he's going to show everybody his sick holodeck.
Yeah, unbelievable, dude. Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was pretty
Yeah.
cool. Now, I just don't get how it works, but I don't know that it's that important to linger
He
on
does
it.
explain it.
How the ground.
Oh, that part, yes.
Now I get what they're saying, but I just don't get how he just. I mean, could he do that anywhere?
It gave me some vibes of like Bugenhagen's astral hologram in Final Fantasy VII, where he like lifts you up into the thing and like shows you.
And all of a sudden, but at least it's like a dark room.
Yeah, and it shows you the mechanism that lifts you
Yeah.
up into the dome.
With this one, it's like he makes it's an illusion. I get it, but still, he could. That's powerful illusion.
Yeah, I don't know if he's summoning or if it's, I don't know, something built into the room. But anyways, they go and they look at Xanarkand as it was 1,000 years ago. And he explains how this is possible, like how they're seeing it. He says, this sphere is a reconstruction created from the thoughts of the dead that wander the Farplane. So he's using a sphere for this. That's
Okay.
how it's being projected.
I gotcha.
The great and wondrous Machina city Xanarkand. Sorry, I skipped this part. Oh, no. The sphere is a reconstruction created from the thoughts of the dead that wander the Farplane. So
Yes.
they are able to recreate in the sphere what Xanarkand looked like because they have access to the Farplane and the dead people who lived in Xanarkand 1,000 years ago
Yeah.
give them the ability to show what it looked like.
And they can summon it.
I'm sure
so to speak,
Fireflies are
project it.
involved somehow.
Yeah.
Fireflies
Well-
and spheres and a bunch of things are kind of like all related.
I did
right?
write this down. There's a reason why the Farplane place projection location is here in Guadosalam. The trees and the nature and the way everything works, it seems like that's kind of attracts the fireflies.
Yes.
And that they're around this place. This place is a special conduit
Yes.
for that type of
Right.
connection.
So he goes on to say, the great and wondrous Machina city Xanarkand, she once lived in this metropolis. And so they're like, who are you talking about? And then we see a projection of Yunalesca and Lord Zaon,
Yeah.
who apparently lived in that time, 1,000 years ago. She was the first, he mentions that she was the first summoner to defeat Sin,
Yep.
and that Yuna inherited her name. So her name was Yunalesca, her name was Yuna, she was named after Yunalesca. And Seymour goes on to talk about the bond of love between Yunalesca and Zaon, that was an
Yeah.
important element of how they were able to defeat Sin.
Yep. This is his pitch.
Yes.
He's building up.
Yes, and this is when he asks her to marry him. I like the way they
Yeah.
do this because he sort of like leans over and whispers it, and you just see her
Oh,
reaction.
she gets so flush and
Yeah.
so nervous, and it's so
She just
funny.
reacts to it, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, what's going on? And then she tells everyone, oh, he asked me to marry him, right? And I like how Arin steps
Yeah.
in here to question this. Like, you understand what she has to do. This is like, I don't know, the 12th time they've said this at this point.
Yeah.
And Seymour's like, of course I do, right? But like, this is a way of like uniting or bringing the people of Spira together.
Right.
Probably a good like real world analogy to this would be like royal weddings in England or something like that. Like people just get
Yes.
excited about
Yes.
royal weddings for some reason.
Yes.
I've never understood it. I guess celebrity weddings and gossip
They're
in the
basically
United States.
the celebrities, yeah.
Yeah.
Those
so,
chosen by God to rule over them,
yeah.
and they're getting married.
So it makes people happy, and the idea is that, let's get married. You'll become a leader to the people of Spira in this way. This is not going to stop you from going on your pilgrimage. Obviously that you're
Yes.
still going to do that.
Yeah.
But this is just be another way of sort of, bringing people together, making people happy. And Arin says, a moment's diversion may amuse an audience, but it changes nothing. And the response to that from Seymour, even so, the actors must play their parts. So I took that down in particular because this was dialogue like we talked
Yeah.
about in Vagrant Story, where one person brings up an analogy and another person kind of plays off of that analogy.
It's a sign of intelligence if you can play off an analogy.
Which is called a conceit in playwriting, right?
Yeah.
And so, just wanted to point that out. It's kind of a nice, really short, just one line from each conceit.
But I love that you just brought up, because you mentioned celebrities getting married, but then he just referred to themselves as actors.
Basically, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's like, well, that's the connection right there.
Yeah, we got to play our part, right?
Yeah, we're all actors, and we got to play the part.
Seymour gives you time to think it over.
Yeah.
And then this part.
I know, dude.
This part's really interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating.
And it actually makes me wonder what I thought of this the first time I played it. And I cannot remember for the life of me.
I don't remember, but it's anyways, we probably shouldn't talk about it too much.
Yes. Well, what happens is Seymour's kind of turning to walk away. And then he stops for a second as Aron is leaving and says, I beg your pardon, Sir Aron. Before that, he basically questions why he's still here. Like, Sir Aron, why are you still here?
Why are you still here?
Something like that, right? Yeah. And then he says, I beg your pardon, we Guado are keen to the scent of the Farplane.
Yeah. And the best part is that Titus is right? He talk about actors playing their part or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, he's not even an actor, but he's playing his part. So the part of the fool, right? So perfectly. He walks up and
starts
sniffs Aron. Or just
pushes him out of the way. That was great.
It's so funny.
That was really great.
But really so there's some foreshadowing there, but to what? Who knows?
Yeah.
I certainly don't know.
I wonder how much I did know the first time I played based on that.
Oh, I love it.
Anyway.
Real quick, I got to mention that the Unaleska and Zaum, Unaleska is wearing basically nothing, and Zaum is dressed head to toe in as many heavy clothes as he could find.
Yeah.
Right? These are the characters that appear opposite each other as statues in the temple.
Yes.
This is the first time we've kind of seen them together, I think.
Yeah.
And these are the statues. In every temple, you see those big statues that I keep bringing up each time we go to a temple. Mm-hmm. This is the first time we're seeing them here.
Yep, those are the people. Okay, outside the manor, Titus is really surprised as they're kind of discussing what Una wants to do about this marriage, and that nobody brings up whether or not she even likes him.
I know. Titus is upset about that. Yeah.
No one's going to bring this up. No one's going to ask her if she loves it or even likes this guy as a factor in deciding.
It's a foregone conclusion. She does not. She doesn't know him at all.
Yeah, but why are we still considering this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Apparently, in Xanarkin in his time, prearranged marriages were not a thing. Probably would have been more similar to our modern ideas about marriage for love, that kind of thing, right? So he's not getting it.
Exactly. Yeah.
She vows either way that she's still going to finish the pilgrimage, though, right? Like she's not gonna, because I think Riku brings that up. Like you could just quit your pilgrimage and just get married, and she's like, no, I'm not doing that, right?
Right.
But then she's like, I'm going to talk to my father in the Farplane and see if I can get some advice on what I should do. So that's the reason they end up going to the Farplane in the first place. As you kind of pull up to the place where there's kind of like a liquidy sort of mirror-like thing you pass through in order to go into.
I love how it's right there, by the way. It's like, we should go consult the Farplane.
Just
right
walk
next
around
door.
the corner. Yeah, right there in Guadosalam. He's asking about wait a minute, and I think this is one of those things to make sure the audience is up to speed, right?
Yes.
He's asking all these kind of dumb questions.
The dumb questions.
Wait a minute.
Plain as fart.
So this is the Farplane we've been talking about all the time, right? And Una sends people here, right? So does that mean dead people live here?
Yeah, and he gets
he's trying to put all those together so that everyone's on the same page. And that's where he has that little weird thing as he's thinking about that.
The ghosts.
Or the ghosts. And he's like, am I going to see ghosts? And Waka's like, you're imagining things again, aren't you? Just come in, you'll see what it's like. Now it's interesting to note that Aron, also Riku, do not go in. Aron's stated reason is searching the past to find the future. That is all there is there, and I need it not. So the idea he's saying here, looking at
looking backwards
your
to
memories
discover.
or the people that you knew before to learn about what you should do in the future is all that is there, and I don't need that.
And because Aron is already determined on what he's going to do.
Right.
So he doesn't need to reflect on anything.
Yeah.
And then, Riku has an interesting...
Yes, she actually details kind of what Maechen was talking about. She says, you're not really going to see the dead, more like your memories of them. People think of their relatives, and the Fireflies react to them. They take on the form of the dead person, an illusion, nothing else. I keep my memories inside. Memories are nice, but that's all they are. Now, again, there's still this conflict between why can you not see the memory of a person who's alive there?
Exactly.
And we actually see that manifest when Titus goes in there and tries to think of Jek.
Exactly.
And Jek does not show up.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? So it's an interesting thing. It's like
if it's just the
there's
memories.
arguments both ways.
Yeah.
Once you go inside, though, I really, really like the imagery. I wanted to see how much you kind of got out of the imagery of like what you interpreted or pulled from it.
Yeah, I wrote.
If anything,
I wrote a lot here. It's a very eerie place, right? So a small circular place with a few stalagmites on the ground. So it's like you're in a cave.
Yeah.
But just like with what Seymour did, you can make the walls become projections.
Yes.
And you can see a place that is not where you currently are, right?
Yes.
You're surrounded by fog and clouds and a hurricane, right? So fog is like a veil. It's obscurity, right? That's what clouds essentially are. It's the veil, right? But the fact that there's a hurricane just right over there, that's like everything's like getting sucked into this place. It's like super unsettling. But you're seeing it all from above. And it's meant to be similar to the illusion conjured by Seymour. And you can see the dead here, but it isn't a real place. You go there to experience a projection of your inner self, right? That's the idea. But then I wrote down the mist and fog, they evaporate, and it makes way to reveal water, just tons of water, right? And fireflies like water.
Yeah.
Lots of water, tons of fireflies, a beautiful garden surrounded by waterfalls. And I don't know if this I don't know exactly what to make of this, exactly. So there's pillars out in the distance.
It's like the rivers from Xanarkand.
But pillars of water, right? That's what I thought.
They're like running up into
they're
the
like
sky.
vertical pillars, which gives the idea that the water is coming down, and then there's this hole in the middle, and you can assume that that's the beginning of another pillar. So we're at a middle point here between a greater higher place and a lower place. And from this place, the water either goes up to the greater place or down. It's clearly going down. There's like a circle, there's like a whirlpool,
the
right?
big waterfall. Yes, because there is that.
The
it's
whirlpool's
almost
what
like
I'm talking
Niagara Falls kind of a looking waterfall, right?
Like on all three sides.
With the flower garden in the middle.
This beautiful
and then
garden.
a lake beyond that with a whirlpool in it, and then these giant pillars
huge,
of water.
like rivers, vertical
but
rivers.
also a giant blue orb.
Yes.
Just floating there in the middle.
I took that to be something like the moon. I didn't know exactly what to make of that. But yeah, there's like a moon, it seems. In fact, I swear that they mention the moon.
Oh,
at some point.
Because I missed that if that's the
in
case.
the dialogue. Well, they may not have. It could have been just me putting in there myself.
Let's see if this
But then there's the place called the Moonflow, right? Which is the Moonflow is where the fireflies come from with all the flowers, right?
Yes.
So you get a million little flowers making fireflies down at the bottom of the waterfalls, right? And then you have what I took to be the moon, and then but that huge thing in the middle is the important part. It's pulling water down to a lower place. Now, where the lower place is, we don't know, but you can assume it would look like a column of water going down. But this is watering it's watering two places at once, right? Is the idea.
Yeah.
And I said with the moon shining above, but I don't know that that's the moon.
Well,
it's a thing.
They actually make a point of sort of highlighting it again after that shot when it's behind Yuna's parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they show it very close up. It's that white orb, and I took notes on that too. So let me just get through this real quick. So we see Yuna's parents with the moon right behind them. This is why I said this is why I thought of the moon. So remember, Yuna is supposed to sound like the word Luna, right? It means moon, right? Yuna means night.
Yes.
And as Yuna sees her parents, right, you have the moon or something like that. So I inferred that it was the moon, I think, based on that. And she's seeing her parents, and her parents are kind of, resemble something like that as well.
Yeah.
That's what I got here. It's a crazy place. I don't know exactly what it all means.
The moon thing.
But tons of water, and it's kind of like a Garden of Eden thing.
Yes.
It's certainly a Garden of Eden thing, except the Garden of Eden was atop a mountain where the rivers were flowing away from the garden. And the fountain was in the midst. This time, the garden is in the midst of the water, and it's at a low point where the waters are flowing into the garden. So there's a little bit of an inverse idea on the Garden of Eden here, but it still kind of has that general feel.
Here's some stuff here from the wiki. This might shed some light. The concept of the Farplane may draw inspiration from the Japanese mythology of Yomi, the Japanese word for the underworld in which horrible creatures guard the exits. According to Shinto mythology, this is where the dead go to dwell indefinitely. The realm of the dead seems to have a geographical continuity with the world of the living and cannot be thought of as a paradise, nor can it be appropriately described as a hell. Rather, all deceased carry on a shadowy existence in perpetuity, regardless of their behavior in life. Yeah, anyways, I think you might be onto something with the moon thing.
Just because it then shows Yuna and her connection with her family.
Right. Let's see what other people think about that too.
Yeah, please tell me, because as much as I looked at this for a long time, and I was like,
too.
hey, you have the veil, you have the parting of the veil, you have the revelation of paradise, but what is it saying?
Yeah.
And I feel like I should know this. I should. It feels like it's clear.
Some piece that...
But I'm missing something. I'm missing something, and I can't quite read it the way that I want to.
Yeah. Anyways.
But it's a temple-like experience. You talk about the veil and the parting of the veil and the revelation of paradise and the connection with the afterlife and all that. It's a temple-type thing, like along the lines of the tabernacle or something like that.
Sure.
The Moses tabernacle. But we're I'm just missing something else.
Yeah.
It may not be Western at all. It could be that it's a Japanese thing that I'm not aware of, and that's why I'm trying to connect it to this Jewish thing, and it's like, it doesn't fit.
Doesn't really go there.
Doesn't fit.
Waka is speaking with Chapu. And
Yeah,
Chapu
that's
looks
fascinating.
nothing like Titus.
He looks a lot like Chapu, though. Yeah, that's kind of funny.
I feel like the people of Spira, because you come back a little later, I can't remember the name of this other NPC. When you leave Guadosalam to the Thunder Plains and you come back, if you go back right away into the Farplane, there's actually two more scenes you see here in the Farplane. One of them with Lulu, which is really like foreshadows something. And I'll show it to you.
Well, I saw a thing with her.
Another thing with this other NPC, I forget, he's like a boy, and he's like talking to his sister. But what he says to her...
I totally missed that.
What he says to her is, you look just like Yuna. And she looks nothing like fetching Yuna. And Waka is saying that Chapu looks just like Titus, and he looks nothing like Titus. So these people's definition of what it means to look just like someone is extremely loose.
Yes. And I'm trying to think of
you have arms and legs? You look just like my brother.
and hair and eyes. Yeah, so I'm trying to think if there's because there is the Japanese idea of an image, right? The image of something, right? To resemble something, right? And someone can resemble a thing that they don't necessarily look like. But I don't think that's what's happening here. I think they are saying that they look like each other.
But they just don't.
And they don't.
Not even close.
And in what way would they resemble, especially since Waka barely meets Titus, and that's like one of the early things he says is, he's like Chapu.
Yeah.
Where it's like, dang it, like what? How? I don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
He was good at blitzball, maybe. That's it.
Anyways, so Waka's telling Chapu about Titus, and we met this guy. He looks like you, and I gave your sword to him, and he's like traveling with us now, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and we're like, whoa, and we're holding the sword.
Holding the sword, and it actually gets upgraded in that moment. So it actually gets some new abilities on the sword.
That's cool.
So the Brotherhood sword gets upgraded.
It's actually a
at this
good
point.
sword. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of like that because in a lot of games like this, your early swords are not very useful by the end of the game.
Ditch them.
Like the Buster Sword, which is the most iconic weapon.
After about
7.
10 minutes, you no longer have it.
You never use the sword again.
Yes.
Actually, that was one of the things I liked about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that you can upgrade the weapons.
Ah, nice.
And they each have kind of like different uses, and so it can be useful later down the line. So there's like a good reason to keep using the Buster Sword later, even if you have something else. Anyway, the point is, Brotherhood gets updated here, which is like that key art sword.
Yeah.
And so you can continue using it. It's like, well, the way weapons work in this game generally, though, and the way weapon upgrading works is they can stay useful long term because they don't actually have like stats, like a strength stat or something like that on them. It's basically each weapon is just a container for abilities. Whether it's like lightning strike or HP plus 10% or slow touch or sleep touch or something like that. And as you upgrade the weapons, you can give them more slots and they can contain more abilities on them. So it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to make this sword into my elemental damage sword, and I'm going to make this one into my apply status effects thing. And so you just switch them out depending on the situation. So I kind of like how they handle weapons in this game. But anyways, Brotherhood gets upgraded here, which is nice because the early game sword is now like more useful. So that's kind of like the conversation that goes on there. But then you go talk to Lulu, and I really like this conversation that Lulu and Titus have about Chapu. And she's sort of realizing, as she's looking at him, like she needs to start letting go and like focusing more on what she's doing now.
Yeah.
And Titus then suggests, in leaving him behind, there's going to be lots of other great guys. Like, what about Waka? She's not super keen on that idea. She says there's a lot more that goes into it than just getting along or something like that, right?
Yes.
You should learn more about women. It might be important for you someday.
I took too many notes on that particular thing. But it's interesting that she isn't talking to Chapu.
No.
Right?
No.
Waka is, and she's there. She didn't stay back, but she's not talking to anybody, right?
Nope, she's just kind of watching.
So that's fascinating. Mm-hmm. But Lulu, maybe this is a little bit later. I actually can't remember. This happens a little bit later, so never mind. But yeah, she tells him that it's not all about just getting along, right?
Yeah. And so I really like how she says goodbye to Chapu here. She says, "Goodbye, Chapu. You always said I looked grumpy, but those were the happiest days of my life."
Yes. Yeah.
Nice, warm line of dialogue there. Yeah. And then you go talk to Yuna, and she kind of talks about how the conclusion she's come to here is she needs to make everyone happy, not just herself, right? She remembers how happy everyone was when her father defeated sin. And she's like, I want to be able to make people happy like that someday. Yeah, it shaped her whole view of selflessness.
Yep.
But so she's kind of come to a decision on what she's going to do about Seymour's offer.
Yeah.
So, but then she tells Titus to try to call Sir Jack.
Right.
And this is the part we were talking about, where if someone is not dead, they won't show up.
You don't
she
see
says,
him.
"Don't worry, he's not going to show up anyways." And so he was like, the more I tried not to think about
the
my
more
old
you
man,
think
the
about
more
him,
I thought about him, but he didn't show up. And he starts thinking, I think I realize the reason a little bit as to why I hate him so much after what he did to Mom and I. And then as he's thinking about his mom, she appears. Now this is really interesting, a really nice moment, character development moment for Titus, a moment of realization and introspection. He says basically that the reason why he started to resent his father is because whenever he was around, his mother neglected him.
Yeah.
She wouldn't even look at me, is what he says.
So there's a word for this. This is the Oedipus complex.
Yes.
This is stage 2 Oedipus complex, where you want to kill your father. You hate your father.
Right.
And Jacques Lacan talks about this. This is one of his big things too. He kind of breaks the Oedipus down a little bit more beyond what Freud had done. And the idea is you're attached to your mother, right? And then at some point your father shows up and demands your mother's attention. And the son hates that.
Yes.
Hates that more than anything.
Yes.
And in some secret way wishes for the death of the father, right? Anyways, they're playing into that a lot.
That's pretty much
here.
exactly what's going on.
Yes. And it's normal.
Yeah. But also, it almost turns the perspective of this around a little bit. It's almost like his dad was tough on him or whatever, but it's almost like his mother was the abusive one in a way, not his father.
I saw that too. I don't know exactly how to read this, but it does seem that way, especially because he says that after Jack was gone, she
just gave up,
and then she was gone quickly too, and then it was almost worse on her part because Jack left not wanting to, but it seems like she kind of, wow.
This is interesting that you bring this up because
I don't remember how much they reveal here though.
Yes.
I can't remember if there's more later.
But
at least we're now getting the idea that the mother maybe wasn't the best mom.
Yes.
Or his perception of her wasn't that she was the best.
But what's interesting is that he didn't interpret her as being a bad mother. he interpreted his father as being the reason why she wasn't attentive.
It wasn't her fault.
Yes, it was his fault.
It was his fault.
That's how he perceived it.
Yes.
This is very much the Karen Horney sort of like view of neurosis with children and the way that they perceive the events, not how they actually were.
Exactly.
Being how they develop psychologically.
It's like you see symbols. You don't actually see events. You see symbols. And then you try to put them together later and recall them, and it's not how it happened.
So he's beginning to sort of like realize this as he's thinking about it. It's like, but what he says is the old lady, okay, so they show a scene, like a flashback, where Aaron comes to Titus and says something about what if she dies or something like that. And Titus is like, don't talk about her as if she's going to die.
Right.
He's like, I'm sorry, you know. But then the narration, Titus's narration comes over and says, the old lady next door told me when a lovebird dies, the one left behind, it just gives up living so it can join its mate.
Yeah.
It was just like that. I hated my old man even more. But really, my old man, and he sort of trails off. Mm-hmm. So I thought this was interesting for a couple of reasons. One, the implication here is that when Jecht left, that this woman was telling Titus, the reason your mother died is because the lovebirds were separated and she just doesn't have the energy to go on when separated from him.
Yeah.
However, there was you were just getting into this.
Yes.
But Dude McGuy, another one of our patrons, right, was saying that the way he interprets this is that she abandoned him. She left.
That's what I kind of felt.
Possibly to go search for her husband.
Right.
And just left him behind.
Yeah. I almost got the feeling that he wasn't her kid. It feels that way a little bit, right? I don't know how that works, and that's definitely not lore. That's just what it feels like. It feels like she kind of ignored him a little, but Jecht was the one who was like, hey, you know, talk to the kid. And then as soon as he was gone, she just gave up on him completely as though he was never hers to begin with, and she rejected having the responsibility of raising someone else's child thrust upon her. It feels like that a little bit. Just a little bit. And I don't think that they will say anything about that. She was probably his mother, but it feels as though she wasn't really his mother.
The way that she is responding to him gives the impression of something like that to you, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could even be that way. I don't know.
It's just like she just didn't care.
Yeah.
When Jecht was around, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, he's starting to kind of, as soon as he starts to think about his old man in a different light, he goes, nah.
He stops. He can't go there. He can't do it. He's got a wall. He's put up a wall there.
He did that earlier at the Kilika Temple, but now he's doing it again, right? Where he's like, maybe he wasn't that bad. No, I don't think so.
Pshaw.
But actually, no, he doesn't do that here. I took this down. I really liked this moment for him. Because what he says is, oh man, I must sound so stupid. How embarrassing.
Yeah.
I've been here dishonoring my father, as Una took umbrage to earlier this whole time.
Yes.
How embarrassing of me to have done that, knowing that it wasn't really my old man. I just didn't like him because it took attention away from me, from my mother.
Yeah.
You know, I sound so stupid for this. He's realizing that and taking responsibility for it for the first time. A really good character moment for him.
No, I think it's great. And this is kind of a pivot here. This moment is kind of a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Where the more he learns about his father, the more that it kind of changes his perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so as they're leaving the Farplane.
See, this is where some of my questions about what the Farplane is. Well, what that Guadosalam version projection of the Farplane is.
Yes.
Because Jyscal comes back, as far as I can tell, unsummoned by anybody.
Yeah, he just walks out.
He just comes out. Fascinating stuff.
Walks out of the Farplane into the real world. Aaron tells Una to send him.
And then Aaron leaves.
He hangs back.
He didn't leave.
He
stays far away.
But he is visibly affected.
Yes, he starts to go like, kneels down.
And he like kneels down. And he's
I remember we talked about this last episode. But he's away. And then Jyscal drops a thing on the ground, a sphere.
Yep.
And we hadn't, seen much of spheres up to this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, Yuna sends Jyscal, not doing her crazy wand thing, universal sending everything around. It was just a single one.
Yeah, just
one
time,
time, one soul kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we pick up the thing, and I can't remember. We don't watch it right then and there, do we? Yuna
keeps it for later.
Yeah, Yuna picks it up and hides it.
On the Thunder Plains, when you stop at Rin's shop, that's what she's watching, and Tidus
yes.
is like,
so no one knew she had this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, Jyscal tried to come back out of the Farplane. Now, according to what we understand about the world and stuff, and they actually say this as they're walking back to Guadosalam again, they're all confused because it's like a person like Jyscal, who had embraced Yevon's teachings, would not be the kind of figure to have died and not been sent. This doesn't make sense. What happened here?
Yeah.
So that's what Yuna says. I don't understand how a man like Lord Jyscal can die and not be sent.
Right.
And Lulu says, I would think that he was sent once, but he stayed on Spira. Something, a powerful emotion, could have bound him to this world.
Even after being sent.
Yeah, such things happen. So if the will is strong enough, even if a person is sent, they can try to come back anyways.
We skipped over a part because this is important. This is about Tidus' mother.
Yes.
He asked why she's in the Farplane and not a fiend, right?
Yes.
And they mention, she must have accepted her death before she died.
Right.
Right. She must have accepted that her fate. Right?
Yes.
So, as it relates to Jyscal, even after being sent, he is rejecting his fate so hard.
Yes.
That he is re-emerging back into the world.
Right. And so Riku says, that's against the rules, isn't it? And Aaron says it means he died an unclean death. So this begins to cast more suspicion on this passing of the power between Jyscal and Seymour.
To Seymour, yeah.
And when you come back, Seymour's not there anymore. He's gone to Macalania Temple,
he's
where he presides as a high priest.
Yeah.
Because Yuna was like, I'll go talk to him and let him know my answer, but he's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we got to go to Macalania Temple now to talk to Seymour, but he had left. So, anyways, cool stuff that they're kind of setting up with that now.
Yep. This is where we have the conversation that kind of ties Tidus and Lulu together here.
Yes.
Tidus is upset that Yuna is even considering getting married to Seymour and that Lulu's okay with it.
Yeah.
He's just like, what's the deal here? How come nobody's talking about whether or not they even like each other, right? And Lulu responds very, what's the word, like short, brief, very much like, there's not much that you can really do about it. Like, this is how things work. And Tidus calls Lulu grumpy, which this is so funny.
That's the same thing that Chapu would say, right?
And there, once again, it's like, yes, they don't look like each other, but we are seeing right here how Tidus is resembling Chapu in some other kind of way, right? He calls her grumpy right after we heard that that's what Chapu always used to say, right? Furthering the similarities between him and Chapu. So, this is beautiful. This is so cool. I love what Lulu says here. Lulu says that, love and marriage and life, it's complicated, and it's something that she has this idea that she's trying to formulate, but she doesn't want to say it to Tidus. And her line here, she says, I don't want to give it words, not yet, right? Because she's trying to explain how love isn't all, rainbows and fairy tales, right? Like, love is dirty and rough and difficult, and you think that it's going to turn out one way and you're wrong. But she doesn't want to say that, right? Yeah. She actually kind of wants to preserve the innocence of Tidus. Yeah. And it's wonderful. So she says she doesn't want to give words to the thought that she's had. Right. She doesn't want to explain why she understands Yuna may be marrying Seymour. But the idea, this is great, because this is something we talked about in episode 3 or 4, I can't remember. The idea of not giving words to something, to an idea or to a concept, is really interesting. Remember back when Tidus tells everyone that the Jek shot doesn't have a name, right? It's nameless, right? Anyone can do it. It can be anything. What that shot is like, it's not concretized. It's still this fluid kind of thing that anyone can enter into and exit out of and pull it and add your own spin on it and do it your way, kind of thing. But once you once you realize it, once you concretize it, it becomes this boundaried thing that's, that wasn't the real Jek shot, right? Because you didn't do this spin. You only spun 20 times, not 30, or however many times he spins. Yeah. It's like, you didn't do the real Jek shot. Yeah. So anyways, it's interesting, right? So my reasoning for why Tita said that back then was because giving words to something, labeling it, naming it, realizes
Makes
the
it
idea.
real.
Yeah. Literally, it literally realizes it, makes the abstract idea a concrete reality through the medium of speech. Remember I mentioned the fireflies are the medium between, the summons and the summoners or something, right? Yeah, and the faith. Well, the words, language, speech is the medium between the abstract ideas and the concrete reality, right? The words are what can bring the abstract into reality. You realize something, right? And you can you speak it into existence, right? It's something kind of more or less like that.
Yes.
She still can't accept it, right? So there's a lot of ideas that are abstract. They're invisible and raw potential. And ideas can become anything before they're completely formed and realized. Part of the formation process, the realization, is categorization through speech. It makes things real, makes things rigid and unmovable. If she doesn't want to give words to an idea, it's because she wants to leave open the possibility, the potential for a resolution that is outside the boundaries of what her current capacity is to be able to think of.
Yes.
Right? So she doesn't know how it's possible that love can be love and beautiful and whatever, because her experience has taught her that that's outside the boundaries of what she considers it to be. But if she draws those boundaries for Titus, she puts him in that same spot where she is, and she doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
It's so funny because you can just read that. I don't want to give words to it. Like, I don't want to tell you, right? Or you can read it as, like, I really like you. I like you, Titus. You're a cool guy. I like being around you, actually. I like you. And because I have this platonic love for you, I'm not actually going to tell you what this means to me, but my understanding of it, because it will destroy your world too, the way it destroyed mine.
Yes.
So I'm not even really done with my notes here. It's so great because this is so perfect.
Well, just one interjection real quick. What's funny about that is she tells him not to fall in love with her. She tells him, do not fall in love with Yuna, right?
Yes.
And you get an option to say, okay, or I'm going to do it anyway. Or
I
the
like
third one
you.
is, actually, you're more my type, Lulu.
You're more my,
which is actually a really good option. I really like that one.
Is it?
Because she says something like, interesting, maybe I'll put you on my list or something like that.
Oh my gosh. Anyway. I would play this game 100 times and I would never choose that option.
Yeah.
No.
It's pretty funny. But
so there exists an abstract possibility that her idea is wrong, right? Where she's saying, don't love Yuna, but I'm not going to tell you why, because maybe somehow through some weird means you can still love her.
Yeah.
I wouldn't if I were you because of my experience, but I'm not going to tell you why because maybe I'm wrong. And that's more or less what she's saying here. There exists an abstract possibility that her idea is wrong, or that it can take a form other than the one that she has formed in her mind. As an act of compassion on Titus, she keeps the idea away from him, right? Making it so that what was crystallized in her mind need not be crystallized in his.
Yeah.
So it's the same reasoning behind Titus not naming the Jek shot Mark III, the Magnificent, whatever. Yes. He doesn't want to attach something so powerful and beautiful to the confines of a rigid structure that becomes, that takes the beauty out of what it is,
Yeah. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff, actually. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I love that he calls it the Macarena Temple.
Yes. Oh, I should have paid attention to what the Japanese was. It had to have been something else.
It's like, we got to go to Macarena Temple now. And it's like, that's Makalania. Now, if you were born probably after the year 2004, you may not even know what this is. You may not know what
the Macarena is.
This
is it in the 90s?
Stupid song back in the 90s that everyone did a dance to. There was an old dance.
I wonder if I could do it. It's been a couple decades.
1, Maca 2, Maca 3, Macarena, right? It was a really stupid song. Anyways, at the time, this would have been a popular reference to have made to pop culture.
Yes.
That's what he's talking about.
Macarena Temple. I love that.
Anyway, so they head off. They're on their way to Makalania Temple to go find Seymour. Now, I think we should probably leave off there.
That sounds good. We come across the girl, the priestess woman.
Shalinda.
Yeah, and she tells us that's where he is.
There was one more thing. If you leave to Makalania Plains, or the Thunder Plains, sorry, and then you come back to the Farplane, there's those 2 extra scenes I was telling you about. In fact, maybe I should just play it real quick for you if you haven't seen it. But the important thing to note is there's the one kid who's talking to his sister saying, you look just like Yuno, but obviously you're better than her or whatever.
Something about that sounds familiar, but I didn't experience that in this playthrough.
Lulu is there looking for someone in particular. She doesn't say who, but she's perplexed that she is not appearing in the Farplane when she thinks of her. So we will get more into that later, but I think it's kind of an important key piece of foreshadowing for something in Lulu's character subplot, which we'll learn a lot more about later in the game.
Okay.
And we see kind of the first seeds of that being planted here. Anyways, we're going to leave off there for now and continue on to the Thunder Plains next time. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate you. Have a good week. Peace out.